So good morning on such a, it is a splendid morning. So thank you for joining us. It's good to see you all. Jonathan's the star of this morning, of course. We actually met in person yesterday, which was very nice, down at Brinsbury College. So it was a great location as well. It was very good. So, but today I'm afraid we're confined to online, but works very well for this sort of event, we find. Okay, so just to introduce myself, though as usual I know most people, I'm Jeff Alexander and I'm Chief Executive of Gatwick Diamond Business, and you see I've got some team members with us. So we're going to hear from Jonathan. I know Jonathan wants a very sort of interactive session, so please take every opportunity to ask questions in person, to put questions onto chat. I assume is the best way to do it, and we'll make it as interactive as we can. Now, I don't know if I'm meant to say this, Jonathan, but Jonathan's theme is pretty much that, like everybody else, he doesn't really know what's happening. But nevertheless, he is the expert, so he has to give us some insights. Otherwise, he's not doing his job. But it has been a time of great change. This is the fourth Ask the Expert slot that Jonathan has done with us. And even since the last one, back in January, there's been a huge amount of change. And as soon as we feel we've got some sort of certainty emerging, of course, things change again. And it's been a time of change, not just for the economy, but it's actually been a time of change for organizations and businesses, and that includes Costa Capital. And I think Jonathan may share some sort of insights with us on what's sort of happening on that front. So a very sort of open discussion, which is what we like to have. And without any further to do, I will hand over to Jonathan Sharrock, Chief Executive of Costa Capital Local Enterprise Partnership.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It's great to see people, and please don't be shy about putting yourselves on video if you want. It's actually quite nice to talk to faces rather than screens, but I'll let people decide. So it's I hadn't quite realised it's the fourth one of these that I've done in the course of lockdown, but my theme today is hopefully not that I don't know anything, but that I feel the need to consult with the room on what you're seeing that's happening. Because I think, as we start to emerge from lockdown, there's as much to say about the uncertainties of the economy around us as there is about definites. So I will start with the definites, which is a bit of a mixed bag. And then I'll talk about what's happening around us and frame some questions which it would be really interesting to hear from the room about. So I suppose I've got to start with what we know about the economic picture in our region. And when I talk about our region, I am talking about the Costa Capital region rather than the Gatwick Diamonds specifically, but I think I can pull out Gatwick Diamonds specific issues. The headline figures aren't particularly good, I have to say. The Chancellor said at the budget last year that he expected the UK economy to shrink by 9.9%. And although the Treasury is upgrading that figure quite often, it's still the biggest predicted decline in many years. And even if the economy bounces back really well, driven by consumer spending and the unlocking of lockdown, it's going to take quite some time. I think that the Treasury is predicting 18 months until it goes back to what it was in February 2019. And then we don't quite know what the future predicted growth rate will be, but the forecasts seem to be that it's around 1.5% a year, which is significantly below the UK's long-term average of 2 to 2.5% growth. So, obviously we all hope that those projections are overly pessimistic, but I think we can't deny that the COVID has had a very significant impact on an economy that was already dealing with quite a lot of change through Brexit and aging population and technology and all the other things that are going on in the UK. And we also know that that's national figures, and that, you know, some parts of the country will do better than average and some parts of the country will do worse than average. And I'm afraid we believe, and I think there's quite a lot of evidence to back this up, that our area and the Gatwick Diamond area in particular is likely to do worse than average in terms of the depth of that impact and the length of time it takes to recover. When the Chancellor forecast 9.9% reduction nationally, our forecast for our region was between a 15 and 17% reduction within the coastal capital area. And it's probably a little bit worse than that in Gatwick Diamond because of the airport, which I'll come on to in a second. So, you know, if the UK figures are getting better, hopefully our figures are getting better. But you know, it's clearly a significant effect on our economy. And I think that's where my level of knowledge becomes a little bit less perfect. And I'd love to, you know, just set out some of the things that we see happening and take your view on them. So I think there's three themes to pull out that we're seeing in the region. One is positive, one is negative, and one is unknown. The one that's positive, to start in a good place, because I try to be optimistic in life. The one that's positive is clearly that, you know, the consumer spending and consumer behaviour has adapted really well to the wonders of lockdown, and whether it's retail spending or spending in pubs, bars and restaurants, or spending in the tech sector, spending in, you know, kind of the leisure economy, we've got some quite good evidence that that's going really well. It's differential from place to place, so, you know, people are more likely to go out and spend money in some towns rather than other towns. But there's lots of good examples. I think they in our area, they are particularly concentrated on the coast and in places like Horsham, where, you know, there's lots of evidence of really strong consumer spend, which is really good. And we've got lots of excellent leisure industries. Some of you maybe from the leisure sector on the call, you know, whether it's pubs, bars and restaurants, or wine producers, or breweries, or coffee people part of the coffee supply chain, or, you know, kind of other leisure and events sectors. Sussex and Surrey do really well in those, and they are clearly benefiting from all this money that consumers have saved up and are now keen to go out and splash. And during lockdown, we were pleased to support about 120 businesses directly who were trying to innovate their business model to adapt to online spending, and just working with those partners. You know, we've seen some really good examples of business-led innovation, whether that's, you know, online ordering of food, or companies moving to a delivery model rather than a kind of physical shop spend model. We do hear a different story from place to place. So, as I say, places like Brighton, Worthing, Horsham, I think have had a really strong spring and early summer. Doesn't appear to be as strong in some other places. I think Crawley is having a difficult time, and I think some other places, maybe in East Surrey, are finding it a little bit harder to get back into their groove. But it would be interesting to hear from you. Where I sit at the moment, I live in Sutton, just near Croydon, so, you know, we're seeing very strong performance in our local high streets. Real contrast with what they're seeing in central London, you know, which is very, very subdued. So I think it depends from place to place what you see. So that's the sector that's going well. The sector that's going less well and that's facing real challenges, well, it won't surprise you to say, is the aviation sector, the travel sector. And obviously in the Gatwick Diamond, that's massively important, because Gatwick's scale, you know, direct employment, indirect employment, and its influence on the whole business climate in and around the airport is significant, and no one's flying. So, you know, I talked to Gatwick last week. At the moment, they're offering somewhere between 50 and 60 flights a day, depending on the day. And the number of passengers is measured in the single figure thousands rather than the hundreds of thousands. So, you know, it's a very, sorry, I mean tens of thousands rather than hundreds of thousands, you know, so it's a very, very, very subdued pattern. those 50 to 60 flights a day are mostly within the British Isles, the Channel Islands, Gibraltar, Iceland, places like that. There's a small handful of flights to what we have to call orange list countries now, which is people sort of taking speculative flights to other countries. And demand for those is obviously very, very low because people aren't flying. And it's just not clear what the pathway out of lockdown is going to be for the aviation sector. You know, it feels to me personally that there are kind of a handful of sectors which the government accepts, even if they don't admit, are going to be long-term disrupted by this. That includes sectors like nightclubs, theatres and performance spaces, and aviation is another one of those, you know, where you just can't see how the pathway back is going to work. Gatwick is saying a 5-year recovery. Department for them individually, Gatwick, but of course we're 2 years into that already. Gatwick is saying, sorry, the Department for Transport is saying a 5 to 10 year recovery for the sector as a whole. And I think we're becoming increasingly aware that areas like ours, which depend on an airport, are in a different category across the country where the local economy is badly affected. So it's not just us. It's true in the towns around Heathrow. It's true in places like Harlow, near Stansted. It's true in Manchester, Birmingham. Any places that have got a big airport, you know, are really suffering in this way. And what we know in our area is that this is feeding through to direct redundancies, large numbers of people still on furlough, not just concentrated in the airline industry or the airport industry, but it also goes to the supply chain. So it's all the ground handlers, the taxi drivers, the hotels, the restaurants, the duty-free shoppers, all of those sectors are depressed. And I think what's worrying me is that the longer that goes on, the more it will start to tarnish our area as a place for other businesses to invest. So Crawley and Hawley and Reigate and Haywards Heath and Burgess Hill are home to lots of businesses that aren't anything to do with the aviation sector, but they've just located here because, you know, the airport provides a great environment to do business in. If the airport is going to have a very uncertain future for coming years, then I am worried about what that means for the investment climate for other businesses. So, you know, if you're a big company running your southern headquarters, you know, odds are you'd have put it in the Gatwick Diamond in the last 10 to 20 years, because Gatwick's just a place that's grown and grown. If that's not going to be the case, why would you stay here? And why wouldn't you move to Reading or Cambridge or Canterbury, or, you know, one of these other growing places in the south that's not, whose fortunes aren't tied directly to aviation? So I think we've really got to watch that as something about the investment climate for the region and just what it means for us as a place, because success breeds success, doesn't it? And if places start to stall, then we've got to, you know, really be aware of that, I think, as a business community. So that's where I'm a little bit glass half empty. And then the one I'm not sure about, and colleagues will have a view, is commuting and working from home. And, you know, what's going to happen to businesses in a few weeks' time when lockdown ends? And what is the business model going to be? Because before the crisis, as a region, we were very lucky that lots of people could live here but take a job in London and commute, and people traded off, didn't they? The kind of the ardours of commuting versus the high wages that you earn from that, and that's what's led to us having such high house prices. And we know that house prices have increased very significantly in the last few months because even more people have relocated out here because they don't want to live in London anymore. But a lot of those choices have been based on an assumption that you can carry on working in London, even if you don't physically go to London very often, that you're going to continue to link your job to what's happening in the capital. And I think it's still to be called, really, what that's going to mean over the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. You know, is London going to come back? Is London going to start to look different, where offices are sort of notionally based in London, but actually workers work all across the country? And if they do work all across the country, are they going to be in Sussex and Surrey, or are they going to go to Cornwall, or are they going to go to Birmingham or Staffordshire or Manchester or, you know, the Highlands of Scotland or whatever? You know, who knows where they're going to go? So what is our future as a as a sort of commuter type destination. And some of the predictions on this are quite interesting. So the Go Ahead Group that you'll know, which is our major transport provider in this area, they produced their annual results a couple of days ago. And the chief executive said that, you know, the commuting model was dead and would never come back. That actually the pattern of large numbers of people getting the 705 from Epsom up to London, getting into the office, and you know, those crowds of people walking over London Bridge that we've seen in the media for decades, that was never going to come back. And that people would be going up a little bit at a time that suited them, in a way that suited them. So for that business, you know, they're going to have to reinvent themselves around a different type of travel. And you can also see, if you look at reports from companies like Canary Wharf Group or the Grosvenor Estate that own a lot of the West End property, or some of the other bigger firms, you know, they're also thinking very, very differently about what their work patterns are going to be. And you might be listening to this thinking, why is he banging on about London? Because I run a business in Manor Royal and I don't really care about London. That's why I'm based in Manor Royal. But my argument is that it's fundamental to the region, because, you know, 10% of our people pre-crisis commuted to town, and they earned more than they could earn locally. That's why they did it. And then that number's grown because we've seen, I mean, we used to have 15,000 people a year coming out of London into the area. The estimates are that that's probably doubled in the last 12 months. It's slightly more than doubled, probably. That's why house prices are going up. So I would argue that you can't see our economy without thinking about London. And there's uncertainty about London, so we should start to think about that. And what I haven't seen enough of, I'm afraid, is examples of our towns evolving to get that London business, you know, because that's what you do, isn't it? You know, in a competitive environment, you stake your claim for X town to be the future of the economy. Some examples of that. So there's some very positive examples down in West Sussex, because the fibre infrastructure, the telecoms infrastructure, you know, in West Sussex has been significantly upgraded in the last few years. So we have a dark fibre capacity all the way up from Brighton up to Gatwick and all along the coast, and it's really good stuff. So some examples I'm hearing in places like Haywards Heath of businesses choosing to move to Haywards Heath, specifically because they've got the fibre infrastructure, and that gives Haywards Heath an advantage over other places in the UK. That's really good. We can also see a lot of activity in Brighton because, you know, of Brighton's advantages, particularly in the tech sector. But I'm not seeing enough of it, and I'm not quite sure what the plan is in all our other towns to get ahead of that. So that's my uncertainty point. And I'll stop in a couple of minutes, but you know, some of the other things that are in play, I think, for the future of the economy are worth listing. As we all get much more used to remote working and use of technology, the growth firms that are going to come out are the ones that have got the capacity to innovate, you know, the ones that are innovative, the ones that are moving into high value products quickest. Question, how good is our economy at innovating and driving innovation? And what do we need to do to make it better? And is this an environment where innovative businesses feel welcomed at home, find it easy to trade, find it easy to find the staff, find the premises, you know, get to market, all that kind of stuff? That's an interesting question. Be good to get your views. I think that skills is a huge angle there, and I've got a couple of members of my team on the call, Lisa and Hannah, who work in our careers team. You know, there is a huge issue, I think, about the labour market situation in the UK. You know, as COVID recedes, we'll understand how many people have left the UK and gone back to their home countries. I think a lot of sectors are very worried about that, particularly hospitality, catering sectors. But we have to, you know, quickly adapt our economy to skill and grow our workers, rather than relying on skilled workers coming in easily from other European countries, because that's not possible anymore. So, you know, how do we have the capability in this area to do that? We knew before the crisis that we got a bit of a demographic challenge in that not enough 20 and 30 somethings lived in this area. Partly because it's too expensive, partly because it's not as much fun as other parts of the country, by and large. So we need to kind of really challenge ourselves on where's the workforce going to come from, and can it afford to live here, and does it want to live here, and will it have the skills that businesses need to do those jobs. And then I think the final point is, well, there's two final points. One is inflation. There's lots of people getting quite worried about inflation and what inflation is going to mean to many sectors. It'd be interesting to get your views on that. And the other is trade and the trading environment, and what opportunities there are in the new trading environment for our firms. You know, to what extent are we incentivizing businesses in this part of the country to trade? And of course, trade works both ways. It's about exporting things that we make and services where that's possible, and it's about attracting international investment. And you know, being an environment where foreign companies want to trade, you have to have both to continue to grow. And we've long been a place where both of those things have happened. But you know, a question is, are we well placed to do that as a region going forward? And you know, can we grow the people? Can we grow the people to do the jobs? Are we creating an environment where top quality businesses naturally grow and want to come and want to invest, and you know, make this a really good place to do business? And are we trading properly? Now, given that we've got a massive blooming airport in the middle of the region, you'd think the last question was a no-brainer, wouldn't you? But it doesn't always work like that, because often people use our airport to go to London. And in my opinion, we need to get a lot more like places like Cambridge and Reading, you know, which have made themselves magnets for international investment. And I think that's the future for me of the Gatwick Diamond and what we need to do. So I hope that's helpful, Jeff. I'll stop there. That's my overview of it. There's some positives, there's some negatives, there's a lot of things we don't know, and I'd love to pursue that conversation with colleagues on the call. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jonathan. That was intriguing. I think there are certain things seem to be pulling in almost opposite directions in a way. The skills issue, you know, is the problem that we're going to have too many people unemployed, particularly as furlough goes, or is the problem that we're not going to have enough people for the jobs that are available? You know, I suspect that the underlying issue we have as a region is the latter, but we'll see. Anyway, I don't have any questions in the sort of chat section, so could I open it up? Any questions from the floor for Jonathan? Any points you'd like to discuss? You'd like Jonathan to expand further on? All very quiet this morning. Could I kick off with one then, Jonathan? We touched on it yesterday when we met at Brinsbury. It's the levelling up agenda, and what does that mean for us? And what does that mean for you, you know, and the Local Enterprise Partnership, given your role in, well, championing the region, including with government? Is that something you'd like to comment on a bit more?
Thank you. Well, I mean, levelling up's a political term, isn't it? And we're waiting for the government to explain. There's going to be a levelling up white paper later in the year where they'll explain exactly what they mean by this phrase. But my view is that it's when they say it, they haven't necessarily got Surrey and Sussex in mind. Shall we put it that way? You know, that it's it plays to a kind of gin and jag perception of the south of England, where basically everything's fine, and a kind of, you know, post-industrial northern towns perception of the north, where everything's not fine. So at its worst, it's a bit of a simplification. Now, you know, I've been to lots of fantastic places in the north of England that are far more affluent than places we have in the south, and I think it's a triumph for political leadership in the north that they've managed to frame the whole political debate in that way. And it does create a real challenge for the rest of us, because London economy primarily, but also the southeast economy, have been the net contributors to UK PLC. And the idea of levelling up, I think, is a bit Robin Hood. You know, you kind of continue that transfer of wealth from one region to the other. What we know, and I've touched on this in my airport piece is that some of our communities, some bits of our economy, and probably the Gatwick Diamond is the top of that list, are going to go, are going to go through a really hard period in the next few years. Because if Gatwick takes 5 years to recover or longer, then that's a significant issue. Just Gatwick Airport alone has invested £200 million a year in the regional economy every year for a decade, building things, building its estate, doing all the stuff they do to create more and more capacity at the airport. That's all stopped. So just that one line of expenditure alone has gone from our regional economy, and there'll be plenty of other businesses doing exactly the same. So I do worry that one of the risks in levelling up is it promotes a caricature of the southeast, and that's our job to fight against that and to kind of bring out the challenges that we face, which is why conversations like this are so important, to understand the challenges that businesses face in the area. Thanks.
Okay, so if you could sort of wave at me or put your electronic hand up, I think Jonathan would be particularly interested in hearing anything from your perspective, your business, how it feels for you at the moment, and whether some of what Jonathan has had to say about the economy more generally, how that relates to your business or your sector. Anyone like to chip in to get the ball rolling?
Greg Burgess has got his hand up, Jeff, if you can.
Well done, Greg. Thank you.
Morning, Jeff. Morning, Jonathan. I suppose just a comment really around your 15 to 17%. It's about the impact of the aviation sector, because I work for DMH Stad, I'm one of the partners in the team. We're Sussex, Surrey and London, and we're seeing a lot of businesses outside of aviation who are actually sort of strengthening and growing. Lots of activity in terms of corporate activity in the region and investments. And I suppose my question is to what extent does that, if you take out aviation, is the 15 to 17% contract them significantly lower? Is it actually that we're into quite a lot of success across the region?
I think it probably is. Yeah, I think it probably is. It's the main differential between our region and the national is, there's a number, but one of them is the disproportionate role that Gatwick Airport had in the regional economy. So roughly Gatwick, and when I say Gatwick, I don't just mean the airport, I mean the economy around the airport, 6 billion out of a 56 billion regional income. So it's more than a tenth. And that does explain quite a lot, I think, of why the predicted decline was greater than nationally. And of course, there are lots of sectors that are doing really well. And I've talked about hospitality, leisure, events, which is going brilliantly. Digital is going brilliantly. And we've got other sectors that have kind of got long-term competitive advantages in the region, the advanced manufacturing sector, the wine sector, the glasshouse sector, the tourism sector. So we know that all of them are continuing to do really well. And there's there's always lots of examples that go both ways, but I think we start on the basis that the impact of the crisis in the Gatwick Diamond is pretty severe, actually, just in terms of the number of people whose livelihood depends on the airport one way or another.
Isn't this the chance to sort of really rebalance things naturally by taking the focus away from aviation?
Yeah,
there'll be lots of businesses based in the city whose workers now will not want to go into the city, which is your point about commuting. And we can attract some of those, and that's financial services or whatever it might be.
I do agree, Greg. I do agree, and I think the only sort of correction to that is everyone's going to have the same idea. So as a region, what are our towns doing to attract people? Because they were in competition. And, if you go to Birmingham, for example, Birmingham's done really well at getting a lot of financial services out of the city, and they're trading off of HS2, all the new offices that are being built in central Birmingham, 45 minutes from central Birmingham to central London, a bit of a no-brainer. The Northwest are doing the same with great success. And that is the levelling up agenda, the kind of assumption that if there's going to be a correction, it will be going north out of London. So the challenge for us is to you know, make it a bit more sophisticated. Now, some places are doing it really well. I've given the Haywards Heath example. But I think there's more to do actually at a local level.
Okay, I've got 2 or 3 comments or questions in chat, but I'm just going to go to Ian first. Ian, I think I saw your hand up.
Yeah.
Or were you scratching your head? No,
You did see my hand up, Jeff.
you have bought lot 29, I'm afraid.
One of the, just the question I've got is, obviously, before the pandemic, there was a lot of improvements planned for the rail system, particularly, you know, going from here to into London. And I'm just interested to hear from Jonathan, are those improvements still intending to go ahead? Does he know, or are they now on the back burner? Because there are still organisations like ours who do still need to get around as a consultancy. We are still travelling into London. Driving in is proving very difficult with the immense number of road closures that are now in place for social distancing purposes. So that's my question. You know, is Jonathan aware that investment is going to continue?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question, Ian. So I'm afraid I'm not aware, and I don't think those decisions have been taken. But I think the business case, I mean, just being practical about it, the business case for demand-led upgrades to the railway has got to be weaker as a result of the change in behaviour. You know, we know that railway use has been really badly affected, massively badly affected. No one's bought season ticket for 18 months. I think they're finding on Southern that there's more passengers using the railway at the weekend now than there were in the week. And there's serious sort of questions about whether that's going to be a long-term shift towards it. As I said, I think a lot of people in the sector are saying, look, the morning commute is gone now, because when you do take the train, of course we take the train, I take the train all the time. When we do take the train, we can choose when we travel a little bit more, because the idea of everyone having to be in the office at 8 o'clock has finished now, so it'll change. Having said that, driving to London's never going to be a feasible option ever again, if it ever was, because of the way that carbon and mobility is evolving, and you know, my best guess is that driving anywhere is going to become, you know, a much less mainstream thing to do over the rest of my working life. It's but no, rail upgrade. We had our eye on a multi-billion-pound investment in Croydon, as you probably know, the kind of major upgrade of the line. I've put a lot of work into that over the last few years. I'm very hopeful, but I'm not sure I'm as optimistic as I was, frankly.
It's so interesting, isn't it, the way things are developing? Because, you know, with railways, for example, the problem has never been under capacity. It's been the concentrated usage at the beginning and the end of the day. And if that pattern has gone, then I suppose that must have implications in terms of what investment is needed. Though we all hope that the Windmill Junction, I think, or whatever, the Croydon investment goes ahead. In a similar,
the argument is, though, sorry, Jeff, just to finish off. The argument is now, though, is while they're less used, surely this is the time to be investing rather than when they were.
Well, you're absolutely right.
Encourage people back to look at different ways, you know, how we travel out of their cars, particularly if the railways and public transport in general was more efficient, more reliable, more attractive, more innovative, more people would probably go back to it and ditch their cars.
I do agree, and I think there's a really interesting question for our region about. I mean, you know, if you look at the timetable, the Southern timetable, it's all about getting people up to London for the morning peak and getting them home at the end of the day, and all capacities focused on that. If you drop that as a priority, then what a difference you could make. I mean, imagine if we were running train services to get people from Horsham to Crawley, or Horsham to Gatwick, Horsham to Manor Royal, or you know, across the coast with a train every 5 minutes rather than 2 trains an hour. You know, that would be exactly what you've just said. So actually getting the train from Worthing to Bognor becomes a much more reasonable option than driving, and that's the opportunity in it. But you know, that will take quite a long time to work through the system, because railways are so sort of centralised and infrastructure is so expensive.
It is certainly a case that from adversity comes opportunity, and I think that's why I'm so with Jonathan when he emphasizes the importance of innovation. I think it's going to be so critical going forward. I want to get through some of the questions in chat. So on a similar theme, Nicola is asking about Coastal Capital's short and longer term strategy to address challenges post-epidemic, and what has the government indicated in terms of level of support? You know, one of the key things we've been pressing for is sector-specific support for the aviation sector, you know, primarily, particularly as, you know, at one time we were relying on things opening up, but that's not happening. So, you know, perhaps your views on that, but more generally on the challenges and what support we can look to from government.
Well, I'll say something about Coastal Capital's role, Jeff. So, you know, our role is changing. In the past, government used us as a way of distributing funds in the region, and they're not doing that anymore. They've got this thing called the Levelling Up Fund that you might have heard of, which is going to be distributed by the Chancellor and by ministers themselves. So they've taken back the money. Well, they haven't taken it back, but they're not giving us any more money to distribute in the region. So a sense of Coastal Capital as having money that it can pass around is no longer true. Instead, we're going to be focused very much on two things, which is, you know, understanding our businesses and our business issues within the region, and secondly, identifying the key projects in the region that will make a difference. And that's not the key projects from a local political point of view. So, you know, it's not about saying, well, the Crawley Queen Square development, for example, a good example of a local project that's smartened up Crawley. This is about the more difficult issues within the economy, where you know what the business community needs and what the economy needs might not always be that politically relevant, or it might be quite controversial politically. So our role is to try and find those issues. You're getting there into issues like innovation, skills, trade, diversity and equality within the economy. You know, how we are working on the competitiveness of the region. Those are the things that Coastal Capital needs to focus on, which we will be doing.
Okay, a few more questions in chat. If you want to ask your question yourself, please put your hand up, and otherwise I'll go through it.
I think Caroline had her hand up, Jeff. I don't know if you can see.
No, I couldn't see Caroline. Was it Caroline? Yes, Caroline, over to you. You're much better at spotting these hands up than I am, Jonathan.
Oh, hi, Jonathan. I work for a training provider, so I'd be interested to know is where you think the most crucial training needs will be going forward. You know, what kind of type of training and what sectors?
That's a great question. And I think, you know, you've got to start from the need to rebalance the economy, as someone said before. You know, not just assume everyone could get a job at Gatwick, but there's much more kind of diverse needs. We have one of the challenges of our regional economy, Caroline, is it's so diverse. So you've got pretty much every type of business in the area, which is a sign of how successful the region's been. And each sector will have different needs. But we know that, you know, some of the key skills are about digital skills and people's ability to work in a really fast changing tech environment. One of the things we're doing is working through our major sectors and just trying to get underneath what the major sector needs are. So we've started with the construction sector. The report's going to be published on that soon, just looking at the pipeline of construction projects. So, you know, think about house building, think about road building, railway building, maybe, you know, all the different things that need to be built. Have we got enough people and enough skills to support that sector? And then from there, we'll move through our other main sectors. So the digital tech sector, the tourism sector, horticulture, viticulture, manufacturing sectors. We're also looking very hard at the innovation environment, particularly in the Gatwick Diamond, as Gatwick Diamond's host to a lot of the biggest value companies. And the question is, well, what does it take to make them continue to thrive? So there's two things there. One is we're working on a bid for an Institute of Technology in the Gatwick Diamond. What that means is basically bringing more university level training into the towns around Gatwick. And the second is the construction of an innovation centre on Manor Royal. And we're working with Thales there, who are one of the main tenants on Manor Royal, to try and get a much you know, most cities have got this, but because we don't have any outside Brighton, you know, a sense of a specific place where businesses can go work with small businesses, entrepreneurs, and kind of be a little hothouse for growth and development. And skills will come from that. So I think that the future is all about being a little bit more imaginative and a little bit more involved in the business environment, and recognizing that most jobs are delivered by small businesses, and small businesses often have got very different needs to bigger businesses. Hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Malcolm, that partly sort of covered your question. I think you were giving Jonathan a hook to say a bit more about the Innovation Centre and its role, you know, in supporting inward investment, or including that role by supporting our R&D. But I think, Jonathan, you've probably covered that.
Yep, absolutely right.
It's an incredibly important project. You know, there's also going to be funding from Crawley via their Towns deal funding, and hopefully that will come together with other government funding via Coast to Capital. And you know, a very major project, about £12 million investment in total. So very important, not just to Crawley, though it will be located in Crawley, but across the Gatwick Diamond and Coast to Capital areas. Just checking if there are any hands up. No, so I am going to move on. Nicola, back to Nicola. Nicola mentions the Business Hothouse Programme. Nicola, is there anything you want to say about that? It's there for information, but did you want to
I think
expand on it?
just to raise awareness that under the Business Hothouse Programme, which is a programme running in Coast to Capital, YTKO Get Set for Growth are managing the access to finance strand. So we are running a number of events to meet some experts, of which one of them is Innovate UK. So Paul was mentioning about the priorities for Innovate UK, part of UK research and innovation. So they were he's coming along to do a presentation overview of the support available to businesses and raising awareness of the funds going forward that they have available. So if you are interested in R&D, not sure where to start, and you know, do come along to the Innovate UK Meet the Expert event we're running. We do have other events. We have a debt finance one and equity finance one. So it's just raising awareness, really, Jeff. Yeah,
no, that's great. Thanks for that. Other thing we need to raise awareness of is R&D tax credit. We have at least two members specialise in advising businesses on R&D tax credit, because it's a resource that's there. It's the government giving tax back to businesses, and it's not as well utilised as it should be. And it doesn't just apply to techie type innovation. It can be the type of innovation that any business can be involved in. So we do our best to raise the profile of that as well. Now, Barry is taking us back to the digital sector and the fact that you mentioned growth in that sector, Jonathan, and just inviting you to expand on that. What aspects in particular are growing?
So it's one of the I've done this job 5 years now, Barry, and one of the things I've really noticed over those years is just how many startups, entrepreneurs, scale up businesses, and increasingly kind of other businesses are talking about digital skills. It really becoming the pervasive theme. We're very lucky in the region that Brighton is sort of a natural focal point for a lot of these tech businesses, but it's not just Brighton now. You know, they're all over the place, and we've seen a lot of investment in the course of the last few months in these firms. So, you know, just a large number of quite small companies, you know, have been very successful in getting significant private investment coming in. So you're talking about quite niche applications there, whether it's apps or the applications of using 5G, which has been in Brighton for a few years already. All the different kind of aspects of the tech economy. It's really taking off. And we've got other centres of excellence, and that's Horsham's home to Creative Assembly. We've got, you know, kind of long-standing traditions across Surrey and Sussex of concentrations of these very kind of tech firms, and also in other businesses. And I think manufacturing is one of the best examples there. You know, tech and the creativity that comes with tech is the future. So when we talk to companies like Thales, who are based in Crawley, or Ceres Power, who are based in Horsham, or Ricardo, who are based in Shoreham, you know, they're companies that make things by and large, but the way they make them is changing, the way they design them, the way they make them. It's all moving towards a tech skill set. And obviously those skills are very precious, very scarce, and very expensive for them. So they want to grow and develop them as best as they can. So there's massive opportunities, I think, for our supply chain, for all our small businesses,
right,
in that area.
And that's kind of my question, is if there's such a high demand, where are they going to meet that demand if there is a shortage?
All over the world, unfortunately. You know, people who've got these skills are in very high demand, and they you know, they might choose to work for Microsoft, they might choose to work for Google, they might choose to work for Thales. The innovation center that we were talking about 5 minutes ago is designed to try and anchor that in the area. So building a physical space on Manor Royal, which in our plan, and it's not confirmed yet, but our plan is that Thales will be the kind of anchor of that, and provide incentives for the digital supply chain to move to Crawley and think of Crawley. If you want a good example of where that's been done well, I think Cambridge gives us one. So Cambridge has created a really successful economy. It's in bioscience rather than tech, but you know, it's about very high skills and how they've developed. They've done that through their business investment, and we'd aspire to do something similar in our area. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is so important. You know, one of the challenges we faced is that we have great, you know, corporates, R&D rich corporates operating in our region, but the linkage between them and innovative SMEs isn't as strong as it should be. Partly, we haven't had the sort of universities acting as a catalyst. So this is going to be, you know, an incredibly important role for the innovation centre. Caroline, I think you asked your question. Final comment I'd make on skills needs. It's about transferability of skills. So as I said earlier, I think we're going to have this huge mismatch of people coming out of their traditional areas of work and then other areas looking for people. And how do we get a better match between those two? People from the aviation sector, the airlines, for example, have got massive transferable skills into the hospitality and care sectors, for example. But how do we make them attractive to those people? Anyway, that's just an observation from me. Barry, have you asked your cheeky question?
Do you want me to?
Got another one?
No, this is a different one. But
go on then. If it's a cheeky question, I think you should ask.
I think it's just a bit of fun, really. So Jonathan, really, so if you were going to start a new business in the Gatwick Diamond area to take advantage of all the dynamics and the stuff that's happening that you're describing, what would that business be? And I've got my pen ready.
Yeah, that's a great. I've seen your question in the chat. It's quite funny. My wife was asking that the other day. What I'm really interested in, if you think about place, Barry, I think that we can be a little bit parochial in this part of the country and not look enough at other places and what we can learn from them. And you know, but we talk a lot about London. I think a lot of people locally talk about London. Oh my God, the last thing we want is London. You know, so we're not London, that's for sure. And then you look at the northern cities or the other cities in the UK and say, well, we're not cities, so that doesn't really apply to us. I think we overlook what so many towns in the southeast have achieved. And I just mentioned Cambridge, one example. Also talk a lot about Reading. Guildford would be another example. Basingstoke would be another example. You know, towns that are no different to ours. In fact, they're really, I grew up in Reading and it's really not very nice compared to a lot of the towns in this area. And yet they've managed to become significantly more successful than many of our towns in terms of attracting investment, keeping their infrastructure up to date, you know, working with their universities, developing themselves and developing a profile for themselves. I was talking to someone just yesterday and she was talking about an American company wanting to invest in the UK, move their operations to the UK. Where are they going to go? They're going to go to Reading, even though, you know, it's a long way from any airport and, you know, is quite an expensive place to move to these days. So my answer would be, I think there's a real gap in the market for talking about our places as growth places I think, you know, I don't particularly like the language of, oh, we've got a beautiful environment and oh, we're kind of, you know, also kind of great outdoors. I think it risks sounding a bit complacent and a little bit off the messaging that successful places have. So that would be my answer.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions or comments? Around. I think one I'd make, and it's sort of picking up on something you said, Jonathan. I do hear people say now about disproportionate reliance on the airport, and I think that's dangerous talk in a way, because it paints the airport as though the airport is the problem, and you know, our economy is in a bad way because of the airport. You know, it is the airport as it recovers that will help drive the economy forward, and will promote the sort of diversity of business that we need in future. You know, the fact that we are disproportionately reliant on the airport is like saying that, I don't know, Sheffield was disproportionately reliant on the steel industry. You know, that's the way it is. You know, and you mentioned some of the figures in terms of the contribution that the airport has made. So I think we need to be careful in our talk that we don't almost describe the airport as the problem, rather than, you know, part of the solution, a big part of the solution going forward.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you, but you're, I mean, of course, it's not wrong to say that we have been over reliant on the airport, because I think we have, and actually we wouldn't be looking down the barrel of this massive contraction in the economy if we had a little bit more in terms of other sectors. But the thing that I do agree with you fundamentally, Jeff, and the thing we overlook is that aviation is going to change hugely, and aviation, you know, people are always going to want to travel. They're always going to want to go around the world. That's inevitable. And aviation has got a big challenge on its hands about sustainability and carbon and noise and, you know, all those things. So the way I'd put it is we should be focusing on making Gatwick the centre of a changing aviation sector. And imagine the opportunities if Crawley and Gatwick Diamond became home to the, you know, the companies that are going to produce carbon neutral engines, or that are going to produce, you know, the new technology that helps aviation thrive. We should be, you know, there's nowhere else in the country knows aviation better than we do. So that, I think, is the challenge for the region.
Yeah, I think that should be our vision, actually, for that area, bringing together so what's seen as a problem, in other words, you know, climate change and the impact on climate change, and then the opportunity of addressing that through innovation and taking advantage of our location and everything else, type of businesses we have. You know, I think if you were writing a strategy now, Jonathan, I think I'd be pressing you to have that as almost a central theme within it. Okay, well, we're very nearly out of time. Are there any final thoughts? Or Jonathan, would you like to sort of round things up on the basis of what you said earlier and the feedback?
I've very much enjoyed the conversation. Thank you, everyone. And you know, I've got 3 members of my team here, being Malcolm, who's spoken, and Lisa and Hannah Thomas, who haven't spoken. And you know, it's just to make sure that you're all aware of the different things that Coastal Capital offers. So you know, we offer a range of services and support for businesses, which Malcolm and his team lead. We also work very hard on how businesses and employers link to the education sector, which is what Lisa and Hannah work on. You know, to make sure that we're providing as much support and signposting as we can for the recruitment challenges, the support challenges that businesses have. So we'd be very pleased to follow up privately if anyone has particular issues that you'd like to discuss. And as you've got us on the call, you can direct message our colleagues now and kind of hook into them if you'd like. So thank you.
Okay, well, that's great. Just a final comment from me. We are, despite yesterday's not unexpected, but nevertheless bad news, we are still at GDB very much looking forward to our first in-person event, which we have coming up. And this is where Sally's going to correct me because I'm going to get everything wrong. But we have an event coming at the splendid Ashdown Park Hotel in July, and I can't remember the date, but that's going to be a face-to-face event with a barbecue and all within whatever the strictest guidance is, we will comply with the strictest guidance. But we are moving forward on that, and you don't have to get married in order to come. It's, you know, we're doing it within the rules that allow us, so we don't have to pretend someone's getting married in order to have the event. All I'd say is places are limited and are going fast, so if you are interested, please have a look on our website. So with that sort of cheap opportunist marketing, all that remains is to thank you, Jonathan. Very informative and engaging as usual. We wish you the very best for, you know, the challenges that lie ahead, and you know, the central role that the LEP Coast to Capital will continue to play.
Thank you, Jeff.
So a round of applause for Jonathan. Can't hear it. No. Yeah. A round of silent applause for Jonathan. Okay, well, thanks to everybody. I think we are done. Yeah, thank you. See you.